Hello everybody, and in this video we are going to be talking about dart functions. Now if you're wondering what a function is, we might say a function is just a set of statements that perform the same task. But as usual, I do not want to go with technical definitions, so let's just get on with it and see and try to understand what functions actually are and how we use them in Dart. So supposing that we have a few variables, so I'm going to create a variable called string name, and I'm going to assign this happy cat, and then I'm going to create another variable, so int. You know what, I should probably make this a double, so double height, and this I'm going to assign it so let me quickly correct that. I'm going to assign this a height of 6.2 feet, and then I'm going to have like another double for weight, and weight is also going to be something like this. And then finally let's have let's say a string, and then we're going to call this our hobby, and our hobby is going to be let's say gaming. Okay, now if we wanted to run all of this code, so let me fix that, we would simply just put everything in a print statement, right? So we would simply say print, and then we would put in something like this and say hello with a comma, my name is, then with string interpolation with a dollar symbol, I'll put in the name variable, something like that. Then we can calm down. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy paste and then put in the rest. Alright, so now that we've copied everything and pasted in, so all I did was to write a print statement to say hello, my name is, and then I'm referring to whatever is inside this, which is the variable called name. So that should be happy cat. Okay, using string interpolation, we've talked about this before. And then I'm printing the next statement, I am this height tall, and I am also this weight heavy, and I love this hobby as a hobby. Now let's run this and see what this looks like. Now we would see exactly that here. So we get to see hello, my name is happy cat, I am 6.2 tall. So you know what, let me actually add feet here, and then let's run this again. So I am 6.2 feet tall, I am also 7.5, so I should probably add kg here. So let's do that again. So 75.5 kg heavy, I love gaming as a hobby. Okay, that's cool and that's great. Now imagine somewhere in my code I needed to at least introduce myself again. Okay, that would mean I have to copy this entire thing and then go paste in that specific area in my code, and this is just too much to be doing. Okay, so if I run this, of course everything is going to be jumbled up, but then you get a meaning. This is just too much to be doing, and if I need this in the third, fourth, fifth place, I'm going to be doing this all over the place. So this is where functions come in to help make our code reusable and maintainable. Okay, so let's look at how we can take all of this and turn it into a function. Alright, so to create a function, we are actually going to do it outside of this void main. And you know what, this is even a function. But anyway, so outside here, I'm going to create a function, and functions have a return type. The return type is basically what the function would give back to you after it finishes whatever it's supposed to do. In our case, this function doesn't bring back anything, doesn't give us back anything, and we have a keyword called void for that. Void just means nothingness, no value. Okay, so this is the function return type, and then the next part is the name of the function. What do we want to call this function? So let's call this myself, and then after that, functions always have a parenthesis. Okay, more on that later. And then we have our curly brackets here. Now inside here, this is where we perform all our code. Everything we want to do, we do it inside this space. Now the next thing I'm going to do is grab all of this, and then I'm going to cut it and then paste it inside here. Okay, now we are going to experience some problems because it doesn't know what these are. And remember when I talked about global variables and all of those things in one of our tutorials? So if we wanted to see this in action, I would rather have to cut this and then put it in here like so. Now it would be able to see all of these things. If I now want to run my function, I have to call it. Okay, to use a function, you have to call the function. How do we call a function? We simply type in the name of the function, so myself, and then parenthesis open, and then we simply end with our semicolon. This is how we simply call a function. And then let's run this, and you notice we still get the same thing just by calling this function. If you do not call this function, so let me comment it out and then run this code, nothing happens. Okay, we have everything here inside this function, but we haven't called it. So calling your function just by mentioning the name and then the parenthesis would give you the result. So let's take it this way. We create our program, we run it, it hits this point. What is this thing? Then it goes through, finds myself, goes into print that, print that, print that, print that. When it's done, it exits. Something like that. But then, like I said, you wouldn't normally create your functions within your main statement or within the major part of your program. So let's actually do this the right way. Okay. So let me get rid of the function name. Let me grab this, cut it out like I did before, and then I'll place it outside here. Now, of course, it is going to complain. We would fix this very soon. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of these variables as we don't need them anymore. Then we are now going to define these variables. Okay. Now here we move on to the next part about functions. Inside these parentheses, we can pass in arguments. Okay. Things that we want to give to our function to do something with, to use it for some work. Okay, so we want to be able to pass in our name to this function, give it our height, give it our weight, and give it our hobby. So in this parenthesis, we create those variables. So our name is a string, so I'm simply going to say string and call it name. This could be anything, but I'm calling it name because I have this here already. And then separated by a comma, I'm going to create, and that was a double. So a double height. And then we have a double for weight. And then finally, we have a string for our hobby. Okay, just like this. And now we have fully created this function, and let's look at how we can use this function now. Now initially, remember when I came back to the main method and then I called my function by saying myself, just like this, and then let me close this. We didn't pass anything here and it worked, right? But now we are saying that anytime I want to use this function, I have to give it a name, I have to give it a height, I have to give it a weight, I have to give it a hobby. And that is the complaint here. 4 positional arguments expected but 0 found. So what do I do here then? I simply pass in my name. My name is of type string, so I open up my quotes and I type in my name in there. And then separated by a comma, what was our height again? 6.2. And then our weight was 75.5, and then our hobby was simply gaming, just like this. Okay, now that we've done this, if you run this code, we are still going to get exactly the same answer. See, nothing changes. But what's going on within this? We did say that if I call myself, I'll give it a name, height, double, and hobby. Did I say double? Wait, sorry. So when I call myself and I passed in happy cat, this entire part is what I have created, happy cat. So the name is happy cat. Now we have name here. So this now contains what I have created here, happy cat. So this name is then passed into this value, which is happy cat, and that's why you see happy cat in here. Same thing happens for this double, which is my height. So this value is passed into the height here, which is then used inside here, which is 6.2, and then so on for the others. This is the basic understanding of how functions work and functions with arguments. Okay, you would also hear some people say parameters is literally the same thing. Okay, so arguments, parameters is what you pass inside the parentheses of your function. You can see the main method here, it has nothing, so you don't have to pass in anything each time you use it. Okay, so I hope this makes some sense. Now, in addition to this, that has some interesting things that we can do. Now, if our function, for example, for the hobby, not everybody has a hobby, right? So what if we wanted to make the hobby optional? In that case, that has a special way of doing that. And the way we do that simply is to wrap the hobby section, okay, in square brackets. So I'm going to do this and then do this. And then after that, I'm going to get rid of the gaming that we put in here. Okay, so now you can see this function takes 1, 2, 3, and an optional 4 values. Okay, now what happens if I run this? It does work, alright. You can see, hello, my name is Happy Cat 6.2, blah blah blah. But then you see, I love null as a hobby. And what is null? We've talked about null several times, which means absence of a value or nothing. Like the no value. 0 is not null. 0 is the value. 0 is 0. Okay, but null is absence of a value. Now you don't want something like this, so what we can do is give this a default value. And the way we give default values is to simply assign this with an equal to, and then for lack of a better hobby, let's say sleeping, something like this. Okay, I know this is getting quite long. Let me see if I can reduce this just a tad bit. I hope this is still visible. So now if we omit a value for hobby like we've done here, then it uses this sleeping as a default value. So let's run this again. And now you can see I love sleeping as a hobby. Okay, so this is how we can create optional values while passing in a default value. So if I come back here and then I simply put back gaming, now if we run this, it isn't going to use the optional value. It is going to rather use what the value I gave to it. So now gaming is then passed into hobby, which is then used in here to display this statement. And when I choose not to pass any value here because this is optional, then when I run this, then it will go back to using sleeping. Okay, so guys, I hope you understand this concept. Okay, now moving on to the next concept about functions. Now in that we have named parameters, okay, or named arguments. And what do we mean by that? What we have done so far is called positional arguments, meaning that the first thing here was name, and so when I call this function I must start with a name value. Then the next thing is the height, which is a double. The next thing is the weight, and we have an optional value which I didn't provide. So we have to put them in that order. I cannot go ahead and do something like I want to start with my weight, so I go ahead and say my weight is 75.5, you know what, not 753, 75.5. Then now I pass in my name as Happy. It's going to complain because then it's taking this first value and assigning it to name, which is a string, and that isn't going to work. And same thing is happening in here. So when you are using this type or this way of creating methods, you have to follow suit. So these are positional, so you enter them in the same way they were positioned inside. Now let's look at named arguments. So the way named arguments work is, let me cut everything out of this place. We simply wrap everything inside these curly braces like this, and then let me paste back what we have. And now the only problem here is that we cannot have square brackets inside, okay, the named argument. So I have to remove this, and then I'm going to remove this also. Okay, and now if I run this right now, you can see we have null, 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 because we haven't passed anything here. Okay, we haven't passed anything here. So now what I am going to do is, before I can pass in a variable, I have to specify the name of that thing. Okay, so right now I want to pass in the name, and then with colon I can pass in whatever name I want. So let's just leave this to Happy. After a comma, I can specify my height, and then after that with the colon also I can say I am 6.2, and then we can specify the weight, and then the weight would be 75.5, and then I can specify what was it, the hobby. Okay, since this is optional default value, I can leave it. Okay, I'll just leave it as it is. And now when I run this, we should still get the same results. Okay, but what is the point then? Well, with this method, I don't have to follow the order. I can actually start with, so let me cut this out. I can start with my height and actually place my name in here, okay, with my weight there. And since these are named parameters, once I have set this height, then it's going to pick this first value, even though it's first, not assign it to this, but go to height, because I have mentioned that the height, okay, is 6.2, so it goes there, and then the name comes here, and then the weight goes in there. This is a lot cleaner for me, but just that you need to write a little bit more code. Okay, that's just about it. And you would notice most of the time with our widgets in Flutter, you have properties, you specify just like this, and then you put in your value. So I hope you get the idea about that. Okay, now let's move on to the next thing about functions, and we are going to talk about the return type of the function. Now this function is a little bit too long for that, but I could manage with this, and in fact I am going to do exactly that, and then I would use a different example to also demonstrate that. So now we can tell that this function we are creating is going to return some strings, or after all, these are all strings. Okay, so we can tell it that after performing all this function, give me back a string. Okay, and the way we do that simply is to use the return keyword, and then I'm going to put in my double quotes here like so. Now you can see a value of type string can be returned from a function because it has a return type of void. Now I have to come here and say this would return as a string. So at the end of whatever this function does, we are expecting a string. So what I can then go on to do is to cut hello up to my name and then paste it inside here, and then I'll grab this also. Alright, so after copying and pasting all that in there, I can now take away all of this. Now I'm going to just reduce this a tad little bit, and I hope this is visible. Okay, now all that we are simply saying is this function, which has a return type of string, whatever it finishes doing, it is going to give us back the statement. Okay, it's going to give us back this. Now let's run this and see what happens. Nothing. Okay, now the reason is that something is happening. Okay, but like we said, this function is bringing us back this entire string, so we can actually get hold of this string in a variable. Okay, so what I can do here now is assign this to a variable. So I'll call this, since it's a string, I can call this string, and then I'll give, what do I call this variable? Let's short for description, and then assign it to that. And then I can go ahead and now print this description. So like so. When we do this, what we are simply doing is that since we said when this function executes, it brings us back a string, we are simply capturing, so in this case, it's bringing us back this. We are capturing that and storing it inside this variable, and then we can print. So if I run this code now, we should get this long statement showing in here. Okay, and you can see everything works, just that it is in one line. Now let me show you how you can quickly put this in separate lines. So what we can do is we can use the special character, which is a backslash and an n, which simply means break. So, or should I say new line. So after this statement, go to the new line and execute the rest. So I'm going to continue, so backslash and n. So after this statement, go to a new line and execute this. So again, backslash n. Okay, and now when we run this code, you would notice that at the side there, everything is brought back just like before. Okay, so this is how you can tell something to go to the next line within that code. Okay, now why would you want to do something? Why would you want a return statement? Now, you may not want to use the result of your function immediately, or you don't want to display it immediately. Let's say you wanted to add two numbers, and then after that you get the answer, and then use it for something else, or a comparison, or do something else before. Then you want to use the return keyword to return that value back to you. You get hold of it and then do other things with it. Let's create a shorter function so that we can see this a lot better. So let's create a function that returns us an integer. So int is a type, and I'm going to call this add, and then inside here it is going to take two numbers, so int num1 and then int num2 for number 1 and number 2. And then inside here I can simply return what? Num1 plus num2, just like this. Okay, so whatever the answer this is going to turn out to be, give it back to me and let me use it for whatever I want. So let me comment this out. So I'm going to select all of this, Ctrl//, and then below this I am going to call add, and then inside here I'm going to pass in 20, and I'm going to separate by comma, I'm going to pass in 30, and then let's end this with a semicolon. Again, remember, if I run this, we are not going to see anything because we are not getting hold of the value, we are not displaying anything. So again, I'm going to create an integer of a name, let's say answer, and then we put it in here. And then I can now print answer so that we can see the answer that we return, which should be what? 50, I guess. Okay, so we can even do something like this and say the answer is string interpolation answer, so that this is a lot readable. So the answer is 50. Okay, so you can see this add function returns us the sum of these two values, and then we can get it and store it inside here. Another use case might be this. Let's say whatever this answer is, we want to check it up and use it for something. So we can use an if statement and then say if our answer, if I can spell, is less than 60, for example, then let's print, I have no idea what to print, but let's print let us go higher. I have no idea what that's supposed to mean. Something like that. And then we can simply end with an else. Let's print and then say good job. Just, this isn't supposed to make real sense, but just to show you how we can use return types. Okay, so we call this function which returns us the sum of the two numbers we pass in here, and since it returns the value, it gives it back to us. We can take it, store it in a new variable, and use it for other things. Think about it this way: you send your kid to the mall to get you certain things. At the end, you expect the kid to return those things back to you. Then you can use it for whatever you want. You get a concept. That is what this return statement basically is doing. So if we run this code now, you notice we get the let us go higher because this plus that is less than 60. So let's go for a value that is higher. So this should be 100, and so we get what? Good job. Okay, I hope you get the idea of the statement. Okay, now the final thing I want to touch on functions is that we can use the fat arrow, or it's also called lambda in some cases, to simplify functions that are very short. You know, this is a very short thing. Okay, we don't really have to open these parentheses and do all of this. So the way we can implement this is to get rid of this. I'm actually going to bring this here, and then the fat arrow is simply an equal to, and then this greater than symbol, just like that. And then I'm going to get rid of the return keyword, just like this. This essentially is the same as return as that. Okay, it's just a short or cleaner version of that. If I were to use the same thing for this, it's not going to work. Okay, it only works with simple one line of code, just like this. If you have several things like we had before here, it wouldn't work. So I could try out with this, but this is so long. You don't want to do that and not even work. So if I run this code now, you see it still work, and we can test that by making this even 10, and then let's run that. And you see we get let us go higher. So I believe this is going to be the end of our functions tutorial, and I hope this has made some sense. And when you start seeing functions here and there in any program, you start to understand why they are mentioning something and how come they are able to pass in values, and then you yourself will start creating your own functions whenever you realize you have a group of code that do a specific or perform a specific task. Okay, so alright guys, this has been Happy Cad as usual, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and of course subscribe to the channel.